Welcome to Machine Minds, where technology and humanity meet. I'm your host, Greg Zahuranec, founder of Samson Rose, a recruiting and search business focused on the robotics and AI industries. The Machine Minds show is where we dive deep into the intricate world of robotics and artificial intelligence. As a staffing industry leader with a passion for the frontiers of technology, I'm pleased to be bringing you intimate conversations with the founders, investors, and trailblazers who are at the heart of the AI and robotics revolution. In each episode, we dig into their journeys, the applications of the products they're working on, and the breakthroughs that are shaping our future. Join us as we explore how these machine minds are transforming the way we live, work, and understand our world. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a tech enthusiast, or just curious about this amazing field, you'll learn something new with each episode. Let's delve into the extraordinary. Let's delve into machine minds. Hello and welcome to Machine Minds. I'm your host, Greg Zahuranec, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Chris Zahuranec, founder and CEO of Citadel North. Thank you for being on the show today, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Let's jump into it. So look, I'm excited to dig into your journey and your insights today. We've spoken several times offline. I just want to share a lot of this with the listeners because I think this is a very interesting and impactful technology and service that you guys would be providing. But to start, can we go back and can you give us a bit of a idea and overview about your background and what led you into the robotics and tech space?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there was two things that really, fed me into like robotics and technology. First off, just from like a educational background standpoint, I majored in physics and math. I actually have a graduate degree in mathematics, which I don't have to tell you, you can't really escape AI without like talking about mathematics and vice versa. I was also in the Army for 6 years as an infantry officer. So the reason I like to bring that up is, and we'll get into it in a second, but seeing things in action, seeing like when you have to make split-second decisions, emergencies, that's what fed me into what I would think about from like the I'll call it decisive action type of mentality. But the way I got into robotics and technology, I had no intention of ever actually getting into this. I just thought it was like a really cool tech. Throughout my career, I went from doing, I would say, like program management and slowly going into data science, machine learning. And then I think all of that changed when I did a project at PwC where we were trying to literally create an intelligent agent that could do everything related to auditing. And it was a really cool experience. It opened my eyes to more of like the heavy R&D type of stuff, not just machine learning and trying to get data into something and getting insights out of it. So I think once I went through that, it opened my eyes a little bit more. And so started looking around. I'm not trained in robotics by background. I had to learn everything. But I think with all of the open courses and everything that's available on the internet, you pretty much have everything you need to learn how to do it, unless you need a little bit of extra money for the hardware. But it's not too bad anymore. But that's what I would say got me more into that space. And my background is both the military and, getting more into the hard sciences and data science, if you will.
Very cool. It's fascinating. Yeah, it's obviously, I always like to start with people's backgrounds because most of the time it's not, quote unquote, traditional. Everyone has a completely different path, and it opens it up to listeners and aspiring entrepreneurs that there's nothing that you can't do if you don't like put your mind to it and apply yourself.
Fair point.
So what was the original spark that made you think there has to be a better way, that the genesis of the idea for Citadel North?
It's really unfortunate to talk about, but I have to be realistic about it. It was after one of the mass shootings that happened in the country. And I was sitting at my in-laws' kitchen table, and I wish I could tell you I had some epic like brain flash or something inspiring that happened, but it just kind of hit me about, can you do anything with robotics to actually like defend these kids or take the fight back to these people that are committing these atrocities? And, it first started as kind of like I don't want to call it a thought experiment. I don't think I'm that intelligent, but it grew from there where I did imagine, I joked with a couple people that it was like R2-D2 that could like, wield a gun or something or fight back. But that's when I started getting more into drone technology, and understanding what these machines can do is really what was the catalyst for Citadel North and getting more into that and understanding how these things work and how they can be applied.
Amazing. Okay, so look, take us back to the inception of Citadel North. What was the initial vision? Who did you kind of bring on board? Who's the founding team, and what's the product? Let's give the listeners an overview of that.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with a more humorous thing with like how we actually went from, hey, this is a cool idea to, okay, let's do something with it.
Yeah,
The story I told you about, when I was sitting at my in-laws kitchen table, that generated a bunch of ideas, but it's actually one of my co-founders, Ira. Funny enough, there's a company in the area. I'm not going to say their name. I don't know if that would fly or not, but they announced a Series A round, and my co-founder thought that it was actually my company, and he was really upset with me that I didn't include him. And so he invited me out to dinner and started like drilling into me about this. And he found out it wasn't me, but the concept was similar enough that he thought it was. And so that's like the first night. I think it was July in 2021 or something, June, July 2021. And so we spent all night talking about this and what it can do. And the more I saw him get excited, and I'm going to pick on him a little bit. He's not somebody you see get excited too often. So seeing him get excited really kind of motivated me.
yeah,
And so a week later, I went to go see my other co-founder, Dave. Dave's a software engineer by background, but he's also one of these like giant geeks. Like if you had view into his room, it'd be all the anime and all like the Star Wars, and I forget what they call those like things in the box, but those collectibles that
yeah,
have like the white box and stuff. But he and I always wanted to start a sci-fi company, so I had this whole pitch prepared with him. And so I'll never forget it. I sat down next to his desk and I had this whole spiel, and he's like, just turns to me and goes, "Hey, when are we going to start this company?" And I just kind of threw like what I had in my head out. And same thing that happened with Ira, same thing happened with Dave. Just started talking about all the ideas and some of the issues I was facing. So with that being said, I know I've been dancing around this, but I'll talk about what Citadel North is doing and be able to fill in these gaps. So what we're doing is we've created what we call on-demand emergency response, right? Which is essentially a two-pronged solution to how we're planning on disrupting emergency services. First, obviously, being on the show, we have a robotic component in the form of a drone. We call the drone Epsilon, and for my mathematically inclined friends, usually Epsilon's a quantity or an error that you want to reduce. So if we're trying to reduce time, we want to, go from there. So a little tidbit for the geeks out there. But with this drone, it's located on site. And one of the other things too that's I know the secret sauce thing will come up in a little bit here, but
yeah,
we primarily focus on indoor applications right now. One of the challenges facing us regarding like outdoor applications is that the FAA has really heavy regulation, especially with the beyond visual line of sight rule. And for those of you who aren't familiar, beyond visual line of sight means that you have to have physical eye contact of the drone at all times, right? Now, there's waivers for that, but that's only been happening in the past couple of years. When we first started doing this, that wasn't a thing. But yeah, so this drone's on site, operates primarily indoors, doesn't bug anybody unless it's activated. So it's like in its own little box. But one of the main things that differentiates us, and we were still scratching our heads about, and even to this day, we don't know, we seem to be one of the only companies, if not the first company, that's actually trying to put payloads on these drones, right? So we have a firefighting variant that has this chemical suppressor that can contain a fire. For the mass shooting use case, we were looking at like non-lethal abilities to, take somebody down. And we're even looking at like medical applications and support applications, and that's more of the idea stage. So that's like the first part, the actual drone. Now, as much as I want to be a mad scientist, I'm a big believer in the human in the loop aspect. I don't want to have the drones automatically like flying around and doing their own thing. I think that would just scare everybody. And we have gotten that feedback. The
yeah,
second part, though, is we have these operation centers that are staffed with former EMS, military, people who have dealt with a crisis and know how to respond. And so what we simply do is train them up on how to fly these drones indoors. And then they'll be able to coordinate with EMS that's local to that location to coordinate a response. So the drone being on site, the Epsilon, and then the human in the loop with the operation centers, that's our 1-2 punch for trying to our goal is to reduce the response time from like hours and minutes down to like 30 seconds.
Amazing. So who
Thanks.
would, I know you said they're there, they're idle, they're not bothering anyone until they're
Yeah.
activated. So who activates them? How does that work?
Yeah, so one of the things we noticed pretty early on in the market is that there's plenty of companies that are dealing with like the Internet of Things aspect. So there's plenty of sensors out there. We were talking about to a company that does like gunshot detection, and they have their own API. And we also have actually even experimented with, can somebody just run up to where the drone is and start yelling at it, and then that'll
Yeah.
activate it. But we have several mechanisms to activate it. It's more the preference of the customer on how they want to activate it. As you can be aware, some people will err on the side of caution and don't want that thing activated if there's not really an emergency.
Of
But
course.
it's easy enough to reset. But I would just say there's multiple ways of activating it. We're not so concerned about detection or anything like that. But yeah, it's almost customizable how you can deploy it if you want.
Awesome. And I know you said that you're one of the only people or the only ones that are experimenting with payloads on these.
Mhm.
Is there anyone else trying to work on something or similar or, you know,
There's actually one company. I know they're gaining a lot of traction. And I know they might be considered a competitor, but I'm actually a really big fan of this company. They're called Brink.
yeah,
I only became aware of them, and it's not for like you could call it more ignorance on my side than them not being prolific enough. But they're one of the only companies that I see that are using this for like first response.
they're
They
in
do
the
have a really
Las
cool,
Vegas police
yeah,
department, right? Yeah.
yeah, they have some police departments across the country that are leveraging these. And one of the things that I thought was really cool is that they have this little like spring bumper on the front that can actually break a window and get inside a building if it needs
Nice.
to, right? So, like I said, it's making us scratch our heads a little bit. It's not for lack of trying, but there are companies like Brink that are leading the way with, hey, get these things in the air and get eyes on site and do some intervention, but
Yeah.
um, we weren't sure if it's like a public opinion thing. We weren't sure if like societally we were ready for it, but it is something we're really pushing hard on. And it doesn't just have to be to deliver like a non-lethal round to an intruder. It could, like I said, we're also looking at like medical support and stuff to
Yeah.
actually save lives.
Yeah. I wanted to, I mean, I guess for me or for anyone listening,
Mhm.
the first thing you probably think about is like that public opinion, or people have their own preconceived ideas or biases or even concerns. How are you dealing with that? And have you come across much of that? Like when people are saying, well, I wouldn't want something like this at my kid's school, or how do you know
Mhm.
it's safe, etc.
I think there's two things, because one of the things I'll talk about is the bias. It's not only with what we're trying to do, but even when I say the word drone, right? Most
Yeah.
people think of something in the air, outdoor. Well, usually it's in the air, not really good on the ground, but usually something in the air, outdoor. So one of the things that we learned pretty early on is we have to be very clear about that it's indoors and it does these things. It just I think just publicly, that's what most people think of with drones, and that's how they've been used so far. So it's not like I can
Mm.
blame anybody for it. What we're doing is pretty unique in that regard. But the other thing too is part of what we're trying to push at Citadel North is we've seen companies that are trying to address the mass shooting problem. Uh, I'll just be blunt, in very insensitive and moronic ways, right? I don't think they're around anymore. I don't even remember what the name of the company is, but there was a company that was trying to push literal iron coffins so that kids can dive into them in case there is a mass shooter, right? And then there's other companies that want to set up um, I'll just bring up Star Wars again, like little turrets that you can have in the corner of like every classroom and stuff, and just like armor up the school with that way. One of the things that we're really passionate about, not to mention the fact that I'm a father of two, like I was telling you before this, and my co-founder Dave is also a father of two. We really want to bring a sense of comfort. Like obviously you're going to
Yeah.
know that these things are on site, but we want to be out of sight, out of mind, be there when you need it, and then it's gone when you don't need it. It doesn't actively collect data, it doesn't actively monitor. But the thing is, it's like one of the questions I get is like, do you think we really need to go this far? And for me, we do need to go this far, because I don't think, Greg, I don't think you ever conceived of this being a problem in this country I know Columbine happened, but we thought that was just like a really crazy one-off thing, but it's been getting
Yeah.
worse, and I personally don't know what the overall solution is. Like, I know that this is, in the end of the day, mitigating the damage, not solving it,
Of
but
course.
it seems like there's like a lockup with trying to figure out how to do this. And like I said, there's a couple companies that are trying to do it and maybe some government entities, but it's just a literal nightmare. And yeah, we do have to go that far. And we're hoping to provide that comfort and peace of mind with this technology.
Yeah, it's so sad that it's actually a thing that you have to, bless you, that you have
Yeah,
to
thank you.
even think about, that you have to solve. You
Yeah.
have to think about how to protect your children because, you know, obviously I'm not from the US originally. I grew up in England, and we don't have this. There was one school shooting when I was a kid, and then they
Uh,
took away guns. They took away handguns for everyone,
yeah.
and there hasn't been since, right? And obviously that couldn't happen here. There's, Second Amendment, a lot of pushback, etc. But it's like,
Yeah.
when there's such a large problem, when innocent children are dying, families getting
Yeah.
affected, what is the solve, and how can you do something to help? Because I see, we put metal detectors at school and police and guards and stuff. It's like, that's crazy. Now I'm also a father
Yeah.
of two, and my youngest just started at school, and even going into that, my wife and I would have those conversations like, how do we even communicate or talk to them about like doing a active shooter drill? Because they don't know. We don't talk about guns and shooting and all of that
Yeah.
stuff. Innocent children, and then they
Yeah.
get thrown into these situations, and it's scary.
It is. It's terrifying, and it's interesting. I'll just be like out and about, and somebody will introduce me to somebody, like a friend, and they'll tell them what I'm doing. And interestingly enough, I get usually a positive reaction to it. I don't know if that's because of just my personality or the way I'm presenting it, but it is a terrifying thing to. And I know this could spark a political conversation, and about the Second Amendment, but
Yeah,
it is really sad for me to see that this has been going on for so long and so little progress has been made about protecting children.
yeah,
Literally the future of our country, and this is where it's heading. But yeah,
and
it's upsetting.
yeah, and it's children doing it to children as well. So like, most of the time, and yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah.
it's crazy. And then what I was going to say about like public opinion and
Mhm.
maybe some of the pushback. I see it online sometimes because obviously being a military man, or I look at like defense tech and stuff like that, and you see
Mhm.
now where weapons get put on uh, robots. So whether they're
Mhm.
AMRs or quadrupeds or whatever, to go into dangerous situations, to surveillance, whatever. And you see public opinion online when people see this, like, oh no, Robocop's a dog now, and whatever,
Yeah.
whatever, and all this
Yeah.
pushback, and it's scary. But um, when you talk about a use case, when you put the scenario out there, when you think about the alternatives or how you can, I mean, as scary as it can be, or as much people would think like, hey, this is a little bit too far, but what's the alternative? It's only there as, one, a deterrent, and two, safety.
Yeah, and that's a question that we've been asking a lot and still revisit periodically because, as far as we know, and like I said before, it's like we're not aware of anything that could really take the quote unquote fight back to people perpetrating this. And like I
Yeah.
said, we've seen something as disgusting as those iron coffins. I remember a while back, I saw a news report about a school that paid like $500,000 to be able to automatically lock down their school, right? And those are steps, but it's also just I don't think it's really solving one of the issues, which is you have somebody in there perpetrating
Yeah.
this, and a lot of times they're not planning on leaving alive, and their intention for whatever reason, is to cause as much damage as possible before they leave this mortal coil. And so that's what we've really thought about. And we've also had discussions about, hey, maybe we don't need to put a payload. Like we've even talked about like these drones, and take it from me, from somebody who's experimenting with them, you get hit by one of these things, it is disruptive and it can really distract
Really.
you. And we've thought about putting like strobe lights and loudspeakers, smoke grenades, whatever. But the real thing is, we just want to be able to take the fight back to these monsters that are perpetrating this. And, you know, I hate that it has gone this far, but Greg, I hate to tell you this, and you probably are well over it. It doesn't seem like it's going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. Um, I'm curious about how they work. We'll dive into the rest of it. But in
Yeah.
a school, obviously, some of these schools are huge. How many of these drones do you see one school having, and do you see them spread out around? Like, what if there's someone barricades themselves in, or things like
Yeah.
that? All of these different use cases. How would it work?
So, we one of the cool things that we do is we run a lot of simulations, right? There's a lot of programs out there that make this unbelievably easy. For instance, I'm not sure if you've heard about Gazebo, if anybody's brought this up on the show yet, but there's a feature in there where you can actually put a blueprint, and then it'll actually build up the floor plan and a 3D model of like the location, right? And so what we've seen so far is that in order to meet this 30-second threshold, which by the way, our customers can vary if they want to, right? But in order to meet the 30 seconds, we've seen that our epsilons can cover about 50,000 square feet, pending, winding ways and things like that.
Yeah.
So from alarm to, hey, it's on action or doing something, yeah, they could cover about 50,000 square feet. So I'm not sure how large your average high school is. It's probably something I should know off the top of my head, but when we're talking with them, it usually sounds like 3 or 4 will cover one school. And a lot of times it's not because of the actual square footage. It's more because schools are usually multi-level, and all of them
Yeah.
have some interesting design to them. So, like I said, we're not trying to push anything, hey, you have to have these number, but we explain like, hey, if you have one, it might take this long for it, especially if it has to reach like the other side of the school. But yeah, we imagine them being placed for, we talked to one administrator about putting them in the auditorium because that's where they're most nervous about something like this going down, the gymnasium, and usually with the hallways. But regarding your point about if somebody barricades themselves in, one, our hope is that we get to the person before they can do anything like that. That's one of the ones that always comes up for me is the Uvalde mass shooting, where this person barricaded themselves for almost 80 minutes and like went unchecked. And I know that was one of the things because they barricaded the door. For us, it's react quick enough so that they don't have time to, and that they're getting harassed, or our machines can take them down at that point.
Yeah.
But I'll be honest with you, Greg, I don't have a good answer. One of the mortal enemies of drones, especially the indoor ones, is the door. And we've had
Yeah.
discussions about how to get through them. We do have some ideas that I don't really like share publicly yet
Of
about
course. Yeah.
what we want to do about that. But it has proven to be a challenge. And, something as simple as a door is definitely one of the thorns in our side here.
Yeah. I mean, I just ask it from like the practicality standpoint, but the truth is, if you've, let's say it's chased someone and cornered them and then they barricade themselves, now they're stuck.
Yeah.
They're stuck until the authorities get there. So that's fine,
Yeah.
unless there's people in there. But having something like this on site is also a deterrent. People
Yeah.
would think twice or be less quote unquote effective of their mission, but you'd be able to stop them.
It's funny you mentioned this because like I said, we're working with a couple of local school districts to pilot this. And one of them asked us for like, how a lot of homes have like the, Guardian or other security companies. They're like, hey, do you have that version? And like I said, we're trying to be a little bit more clandestine. And they're like, no, we want people to know that these things are here, like as a deterrent. So, I guess we got to, get that graphic going, but, property under protection of Citadel North. But we are hoping it's a deterrent as well and make somebody think twice before trying to do anything with our kids.
Yeah, for sure. So you talked about you've obviously got the drones, you got the operations center. let's go back to some of that secret sauce or the technology. Is
Yeah.
there anything more that you can share with us?
So one of the things that I'm surprised about, or was surprised coming into this, is that because of the indoor aspect, usually with obstacle detection, it's the computer has the preference or the operator has the preference. There's usually not like a blending of the two. One of the things that we're working on heavily, going back to the door thing and a door frame, is how do you convolve both of them so that like the algorithm or the agent can, determine, hey, where are you trying to go? What's the best path forward? We call it like augmented pilot or indoor navigation. And so that's another part of the secret sauce, especially if we want to operate indoors and, pilots remotely piloting these things from like 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
Other than that, from secret sauce, one thing I will share, because I get this question a lot, I had an investor give me a really hard time because he told me that I'm trying to reinvent drones themselves, right? Which is probably the farthest thing. We're actually, if anything, augmenting them. There's some
Mhm.
software, we have some hardware that we add to it. But for me, drones are like a solved issue. Like they can do some really impressive things, even out of the box and even from like a hobbyist standpoint. But one thing I want to be clear about is that we're not trying to reinvent the drone chassis or how drones fly or anything like that. It's more just the further applications and using some of this AI to navigate properly through indoors and some of the hardware components for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's right. I mean, there's so many drone options, and like you said, it solved is a one way of putting it for sure. I mean, I don't know how
Yeah,
much you can put on them right now for this use
yeah,
case. Like, who
yeah.
knows what's coming? But
I'm sure I'll have somebody give me a comment about it's not solved. There's so many things.
yeah,
Yes, there are, but for what we're trying to do, we don't need to reinvent drones
but to
or how they
reinvent
work.
it,
Yeah,
yeah, no one's gonna say like, oh, it's some frontier tech, deep tech to make a new drone, right? You might
yeah.
improve them slightly, but given that in such a competitive industry, right, drone technology and
Mhm.
things like that, and I don't know where you'd kind of fall into, probably like defense, right, public safety and defense. It is competitive. It is moving pretty quickly, especially with you throw in robotics, you throw in all the AI and mapping tech, etc. How do you guys plan to stay ahead and ensure that you're going to be ahead of the curve?
We when the three of us first got together, one of the most fun things was actually exploring what we could potentially do with these. So while we're on year 2, mentally we're also on year 10 with like where we want to see these things. So right now we're talking about direct action drones and being piloted remotely, and we've developed the tech for that. I obviously don't want to share too much about what we're trying to do, but
Yeah.
there's other areas that um, I firmly believe academic research is maybe 150 years ahead. And it's not like a can we, it's a should we, or how do we implement this, right? So one of the areas is even like swarm robotics, and also having an intelligent agent that can, command these things, right? And I know, God, it's scary, AI, Terminator stuff, but like, we're like I said, we're big believers of human and elite and not having these things have total control. But you know, going back to a school, right? It's unbelievable how many rooms are actually in your average high school, right? And so if one of these agents has a map of the school and they know where the epsilons are, one of the things we want to explore is what's the most effective way to search for and encounter this person, or if there's persons, I know it's really rare that it's more than one person, but it does happen from what we've seen. So to answer your question, we have a lot of ideas we want to explore. I think the trick is going to be what are we ready for societally, and also what can we do at this point. So that's what I'd like to say to stay ahead. And like I said, I know I shared one thing, but we got some other stuff, especially like I said, handling doors. We have a really crazy way that we want to try to tackle doors, but we don't want to share that yet. Well, obviously for various reasons.
Yeah, more to come for sure.
Yeah, more to come for sure.
Let's talk about the standards, because I'm sure your technology, this solution, it's potentially going to set new standards or bring up new conversations, whether it's
Yeah.
in school districts or security, etc. What impact do you hope that Citadel North will have on the industry?
So I'm really hoping that we join some of these other companies. First off, from the outdoor perspective, um, with our country, the United States is very far behind regarding drone regulations and the FAA. Other countries are really beating us to the punch about how to deploy these things outdoors and use them more for just hobbyists or for military applications, right? And so that's one thing that I'm really hoping that we originally didn't want to like just do indoor for the sake of it. It's because of the regulation, like we discussed earlier, that it was more of a okay, let's skirt that for right now because that's obviously something that needs to be tackled. On the other hand, going back to the indoor applications, there's no regulation there. So one of the things that we're bracing for impact for is, hey, is this going to set up new standards for internal use? And is like, do you have to have certain dimensions of a hallway or a room where you're allowed to fly something, or is there going to be some ratio like that? Are they going to implement the same rules that from outdoor as they do indoor? Like, are we going to encounter an issue with the beyond visual line of sight if somebody's operating it from like 1,000 miles away? What we're hoping to show is that the technology's there, and hopefully the acceptance of these things will move that needle. But it is something that we're keeping our eye on right now because for the indoor stuff, that doesn't exist. The outdoor stuff, obviously, we talked about, but those are what I would say from a standard standpoint. The other one too is like we talked about, like there's a couple companies that are putting payloads or weapons on like robotics in general. I haven't heard about anything, but I'm sure regulations are going to start coming up with that one. What
Yeah,
that looks like, I'm not sure, but I don't know if you have any ideas on where you think it might head. But
I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
like from being a military man, normally when it comes to defense tech or the government, that's where things are going to get tried out first, and they're
yeah,
probably going to get approvals. That's the safe
yeah,
test bed. And then there's private land, like we see even autonomous vehicles, for example, something as simple as that, which now Waymo's making some huge strides with and doing so many rides every single day. But
yeah,
prior to that, to get to like level 4, level 5 autonomy, it had to be on private land. You're looking at mines and farms and things like that,
mhm,
even at lower speeds. So when it comes to these defense technologies, I can see that happening. Like I'm aware of companies utilizing like drones and AMRs and stuff like that for defense to just like navigate and map out certain areas, whether it's a
yeah,
battlefield or whatever it is. But that probably wouldn't be used around the general public, right?
right, yeah. That's a
So
good point. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And then you brought up something else that's really interesting. So I have a close friend of mine. Her name's Katarina. I'm trying to actually bring her on as our CUO when the time is right. One of the things that we had a discussion about is like, what type of company are we really? Because I've been told, oh, we're health and human services, we're robotics, we're security. But she's like, nah, you're aerospace and defense, which threw me off for a little bit. But it actually might be the most applicable to like what we're doing. Just you usually think of the Boeings of the world or like the Lockheed Martins, and obviously I don't compare ourselves to that yet, but it is just an interesting, I guess, thought exercise about like what type of company, because I do get asked that,
yeah.
and I sometimes default to say, hey, we're robotics, but sometimes I don't even know if that really encompasses what we're doing.
Yeah, it's true because a lot of drone companies, they fall into drones and robotics, right? That's like
Yeah,
a category in itself. And then you've got like the defense and aerospace as well, but you can break those up separately too. Drones can
yeah,
be its own thing. There's a lot of technology that overlaps from robotics, and then defense and aerospace can be two completely separate things as well. But certain ways of how they categorize, depending on what you're working on, will fall into defense. If you're
yeah,
working on rockets, even if you're just going to the space
yeah,
and you're not using that rocket to blow anything up, but that falls. Um, yeah, it's an interesting question. Actually, I think it's the use case, right? Because the service that you're providing, the use case is it's defense.
yeah.
You know, security and defense. Hmm.
Yeah.
In-
I mean, it's not something that like we need to define, at least from a
right.
titular perspective, but it's always been interesting trying to answer that question. And one time I was told that we're deep tech, and I know that's a big area right now, but
Yeah.
like, I don't know, just maybe scratch my head, and it's just an interesting thought exercise for sure.
Yeah, definitely an interesting exercise. And then also there's benefits for being categorized in different areas, right? You can open up different funding opportunities, different
Yeah.
regulations, things like that. So yeah, definitely something worth looking at. And I've seen companies split, right? So they have part of it that is like the service that they provide, and that's just like a service-based business. And
Yeah.
then there's the technology side or the R&D side, which is falls into a different category.
Yeah. Yeah. It might
Yeah.
be something we have to look at eventually here.
Yeah, for sure. So we talked about the standards there, but are there any standards that you think need to be rethought right now or even disrupted in general?
um, I'll go back to it. It's just the FAA stuff, and I
Mhm.
get why it was written. I mean, you could have a 12-year-old kid who has a hobbyist drone that they never fly before. All of a sudden, you fly that thing 1,000 feet in the air, and cross the paths with like a helicopter or an airplane. You have an issue, and I'm very
Yeah.
well aware of the risk that drones pose to airliners and stuff. However, I do think that instead of just playing it super safe, that does need to be revisited, because it's not just this type of stuff that I'm talking about with you today that
Yeah.
could be disrupted. It's even just things about like the drone deliveries, or even just like other applications for like, people are surprised when I tell them about what I'm trying to do with them. um, there's hundreds of other use cases that I wish I could list off, but I don't know. Like, people have to discover them, and I just think they're wonderful machines. And there's things on YouTube that show their power, but them not operating outdoors like they can be. Um, and one thing I'll share with you and the listeners, Greg, is that I can literally, if the drone's fully set up and stuff, and it has GPS signal, I can literally write 4 lines of Python, that when that executes, it could take off from my house and fly to my in-laws' house like 15 minutes away and land. You know, that's how developed the open source side of drone technology is, and that's how I'll say robust it is at this point. So yeah, I really do think the FAA stuff needs to be revisited to really unlock the potential of drones in this country, if
Yeah.
not globally.
Very good point. Let's talk about your team and team vision in general,
Yeah.
because obviously a founder's vision can only go so far,
Mhm.
but without that right team, and you've already mentioned who you're like earmarking for the COO, you talked a bit about your founding team, but
Yeah.
what qualities are you trying to look for and bring on when you're building the team at Citadel North?
I think there's a couple of things that I would look for. I'll share an interesting Army exercise I went through,
Yeah.
where if you had the choice to um, have a unit full of people that can shoot 100% like marksmanship, or you could have a unit of people that are just dependable, which one would you go for? And the answer, it depends on your liking there, but I'd like to lean on the dependability. You know,
Yeah.
and so that's a trait that, um, to be honest with you, I find to be more rare and rare. One of my biggest pet peeves is when somebody says, "Oh, I'll get that to you," and "Oh, I'll follow up with you." And I get that there's like hundreds of things going on in our lives, but that's always something that's irked me. And who knows, maybe family members are laughing at me right now because I do the same thing to them. But um, so there's the dependability aspect, but also another thing that I really look for. I don't want to say cultural fit. I don't want to say like the generic things that we see on LinkedIn all the time. But what I will say is that I would like them to fit into our geeky dreamer, but also can build it mentality. You know, my co-founders and I went through an interesting thing where actually it's relevant to this. We came up with like, what are our values? And on the one hand, it's pragmatism that we're looking for. Where you obviously can't field something that's like highly experimental and save children's lives or do the things that we're trying to do, without really engineering it well, right? On the other hand, this came out of the fact that another value that we have is audacity, to really challenge. what it means to do these things now and come up with a new way. And I know that sounds like a commercial for any global company or something, but it really does hold here because the first few hires that we do have and are going to have are going to be critical with shaping how we would implement these solutions going forward. So
Yeah.
I'm not so much concerned. Before all of this, I had the privilege of like not only managing people directly, but managing managers of managing managers of managers, right? Um, One thing that I've taken away from it, and I will die on the hill for this, is that skills can be taught. There's rarely any job on the planet that I feel like if you don't give 3 months for the person to learn, that they're not going to learn it pretty well, right? I know there's the doctors of the world and like the professionals that, regulatory wise, you can't do that. But that's why I go back just to more to the attitude and just the, hey, would they be a good fit versus, having somebody who's an expert in indoor robotics.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. I think the best kind of rules to have when you're hiring, as well as culture, because I always like to think about culture as like not a culture fit, but a culture add. I think that's
Okay.
kind of like what you were saying in a different way, like not just like, hey, we don't just want people that are like us, but they can fit into this way of thinking or add to this way of thinking and
Mhm.
attacking a problem and way of work, right? Because
Yeah.
the the danger with culture fit, especially as you like scale that out, is you just end up with a bunch of people that are like-minded,
Yeah.
like same way of thinking, same way of viewing things. And when you're trying to do something disruptive, the more um, diversity that you have, diverse thought more than anything is important because you look at
Yeah.
things from a different angle. Like you've got people from military, you've got people from different industries, you've got people that have done this like regulatory wise or rogue R&D, whatever it is. There's different ways of attacking a problem.
Yeah.
Uh,
And to add to that too, because I know like diversity has been something that's come up a lot over the past, especially like decade.
yeah,
Um, I really am a big believer in that one. I think some of the best solutions that I've seen, not only through Citadel North, but also even in my corporate jobs before, that have come from, the new person that just did a coding boot camp, or,
right,
somebody who comes from a non-traditional background. I had one data engineer I had the privilege of managing that she did video game programming before she went into the data engineer side. And so that always provided some interesting insights, which she could borrow from that one. And
yeah,
I know that's probably like a soundbite of some CEO, like I said, of like a Fortune 500 company, like, oh, diversity drives everything. But like, I think I am gonna like just based off this conversation, like look for those interesting
yeah.
and non-traditional, because I do think not having the for against the military stuff, but not having the uniform, everybody comes from the same background thing would be more powerful in this situation.
I was having this conversation the other day as well because again, diversity isn't just like gender or race or anything like
Yeah,
that. It also background, right? Like you said, non-traditional. Some people like different types of school. You're not all Ivy League, or you're not, all tier one universities,
yeah,
whatever. Um, Boot camps, etc. It does bring that diverse thought, but then also when talking to like VCs and talking to even people having a big impact on an industry, they're like, we look at it with, we need an expert from that space, right?
mm,
Who understands the space. But then normally we want someone outside of the space, whether they're the technologist or they're the salesperson or they're on the product side, to
yeah,
attack it from a different area because you're not conditioned with, like you use the military mindset. Like if everyone comes from that, you're used to thinking about things in a certain way,
yeah,
certain parameters, certain process, structure, who's going to be involved. But if you have someone completely outside from that and you look at a problem, when they say like fresh eyes on the problem, it really is that. And
yeah.
then you can through a lot of the noise or think about a different way of doing it. And that's very powerful.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I've seen that happen time and time again. Like I said, both within Citadel North and even out, my corporate, and even in the military. I know we talk about the military being uniform, but I've had some really interesting people I've come across in the military who propose some really out there solutions to some of the things that we were facing.
Yeah, Good stuff. Well, I know we're getting close on time here, so
Mhm.
let's talk about the future of robotics and hard tech in general. What do you think about when you look to the future of the space, and what excites you most? Are there like specific trends or developments that you believe are going to like reshape the industry in some way, or even what you're working on?
Um, I mean, I could plug what I'm working on here, but I'll take a different path with this one. But I think I'll go back to what I said about like my co-founders. Like, I told you about Dave and I always wanted to do some sci-fi thing in the future. And I'll extend that to my other co-founder, Ira. But one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is, everybody wanted to see the Jetsons or Star Wars or something come in. What I really am just looking forward to seeing, actually, I'll tell you a quick story because my wife's going to laugh at this one. There's I'm not sure if they're a global or I'm sorry, a national grocery chain, but we have a chain around us called Giant, like Giant food stores, right? And they fielded this. I think what it does is it detects spills, right? It's called Marty, right? And I actually have a selfie with Marty because I was so excited because it was the first time, at least for me, that there was a robot operating in public, like it was around people. And I took selfies with it. My wife thought I was like the biggest moron doing this because I had to stop it a couple of times to do it. But
Yeah,
like I was super excited because I'm like, wow, it's the start, like robots are gonna
yeah,
be more and more common. And I know I think most people get annoyed by this thing because it like blocks the lettuce and stuff like that, or it'll just stay there if there's a spill. But for me, that's the advent of okay, more to come. And so
yeah,
one of the things that I always talk to people about as well is that I really do believe drones are gonna like litter the sky at some point. And I'm sorry to say, like if people just admire the sky itself, but like they're going to be more common than cars, and maybe that's the same for robots. But I think
yeah.
that's what really excites me. Seeing the stuff in sci-fi like 30 years ago, and now seeing that to start to become reality. So, you know, I'm excited to be part of that, but I'm also excited to see what other companies and other institutions come up with that. What I want to see is robots help people more and save lives, and so I'm looking forward to seeing that vision come to life.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, when you go to certain places, you go to the Bay Area, you go to Vegas and things like that, they're using robots more and more. There's like
Yeah,
robot bartenders, and yeah, in the airport, you've got like Cafe X as a robot coffee. You go to any of the conferences, there's like little cleaning robots that go around, or hospitality robots, and it's cool. Like it's not everywhere, right? But then
yeah.
in the Bay Area, you go to San Francisco, you go to San Jose, it's just so in your face because you've got your Waymo rides, you've got the hotels that have robots, and it's cool to see, especially when you're in the space, because you're like, oh,
Yeah.
like it's coming, it's here. It's like one small step at a time, and
Yeah.
yeah, the more people see them and become comfortable with them and aware of them, the easier the public is to adapt to having them in their everyday lives.
Yeah. So maybe 10 years from now, we could do another one of these things and talk about, hey, like what's changed so far. And,
Yeah,
maybe that robot revolution really would have taken place.
exactly. Look, before we wrap, any piece of advice to people considering becoming an entrepreneur, go down this journey and start their career and their project in robotics?
Yeah. I think there's a couple, and I think we mentioned some of them throughout the show here. One of them is just like I mentioned, I came from a hard sciences background with like mathematics and physics. However, I learned enough to build like the prototype, that we're using right now. And so one thing I would say is if there's anybody out there that's afraid of like coding or getting their hands dirty, um, I kept a journal of some of the stuff that I did early on, and I look back at it sometimes, and I'm like, man, I was such a moron. I didn't realize that voltage divider did this. No wonder why I got shocked and stuff. So there's just plenty of stuff out there to learn, and actually get more hands-on technical, even if you've never coded in your life. And the other thing too, as much as it's probably mentioned not only in the entrepreneurial world, but also probably on your show as well, is that one thing that I've really had to do is stick with it. Like even the past month, and I'm not going to go through them, but I've had some letdowns. I've had some promised funding all of a sudden get yanked from me. I had, a pitch competition where I got blown out of the water by a company that I thought in a million years would never beat us, type of thing. And so you're going to have those really bad days, but just stick with it and build up that grit. And in the end, I'm hoping that it's worth it, and I would encourage everybody else to keep with it if you're on that journey or planning on going on that journey.
Right. Yeah. Commitment and grit. Big key things to success here.
Yeah, for
Well, look,
sure.
thanks again for being on the show, Chris. Where can our audience learn more about Citadel North and your work and follow along with all the progress?
Yeah, we have our website, citadelnorth.com, if you want to see some of the demos of some of what we're doing. I will be honest, we have to update the content, and hopefully we're going to do that in the next week. The other thing too is we have the Facebook/Metas, the Twitters, and all the other social media things. So feel free to follow us on there. And also, if you're interested, feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to talk shop more, whether you're an investor or potential customer or just somebody who's interested in the space.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you sharing all of this and giving us an insight and glimpse into what you guys are working on. And I'll be keeping a close eye on it. Hopefully see some big things soon.
All right. Thanks, Greg. Really appreciate it. Enjoyed it.
My pleasure.